Hi, my name's Terry Rich. I'm a birder and ornithologist in Boise, Idaho. I've been doing recordings for my YouTube channel, Bird Talk with Terry Rich, where this lives. And if you've found this, you've found that site. These talks are normally given up at the Foothills Learning Center here in Boise. And due to COVID, we've been putting them on Zoom and then on the internet for people to view in the safety and healthiness of their own homes. Today's talk is one of two I'm putting up for November called Identifying Birds, the Role of Bird Weight. Bird weight is not exactly a field mark, but I think it should be considered as more of a field mark than it is, along with eye lines and wing bars and undertail coverts and so on. I want to walk through why I think this is true for the top 25 birds that occurred on Idaho feeders last winter, according to Project FeederWatch. The data I have on bird weights is from Birds of the World Online. So here are the top 25 feeder birds in Idaho last winter. You will see a few species as we walk through each one of these rather quickly, that some of these birds are not necessarily found here in southwestern Idaho, but get onto the feeder watch list because they're common in northern Idaho, perhaps eastern Idaho over by the Tetons. As I said, the weight data are from Birds of the World Online. This used to be, not too long ago, Birds of North America, but the Cornell has expanded this to include all the birds of the world, and it is the single best reference for birds that you can get a hold of. It does cost about $40 a year, but I think for any even halfway serious birder, it's well worth the money. So a real quick review of, I guess, physics. The volume of a bird goes up a lot faster, or of any animal, anything really, the volume goes up way faster than the length or the width. If you look at the blue line here, this just tracks how the volume of a sphere goes up as you increase the radius. And you can see the radius is cubed in this formula, so that starts to accelerate really quickly. And as the radius gets bigger, the sphere volume goes up more and more rapidly. Of course, birds aren't spheres, and they're not even really ellipsoids, but if you look at the ellipsoid, which has 3 different axes you can put values in for, if it's not a sphere, it's not going to increase quite so quickly, but the point is it increases ever faster as birds get longer or the wingspan goes up. And I'll look at a graph of that right now. So here is a graph of all 25 feeder birds from last winter, just looking at their mean length. And you can see that goes from the smallest of somewhere around 4 inches to the largest at somewhere around 21 inches. And a really key factor to look at right here is that ratio down below. So the ratio between the very smallest and the very biggest feeder bird is 5.3. This will become important in a second. We can look at wingspan as well, and you can see the wingspan of these 25 feeder birds. The smallest is around 6 or 7 inches, and the largest around 30, 35, 36 inches. And again, surprisingly, the ratio between those, the largest and the smallest, that is, that with the largest wingspan and the smallest wingspan is, again, 5.3. I think it's a fluke. I don't know if that's a universal constant or not. You could look that up. But here's the key. Here's the difference in weight. And of course, we're using weight here as an approximation for volume. And I'll probably say size a few times. When I say size, I mean weight. So if you look at the difference here, look at that. The smallest feeder bird is just above no weight, just above 0 ounces. And the largest is up there at, what is that, nearly 18. So the ratio between these two is the key point, and that is nearly 51. So whereas the difference in the length of the difference in the wingspan from the smallest to the largest was 5.3, the difference in weight from the smallest to the largest is almost 51. That's why it's such a good indicator, such a good field mark, if you will, that I think can get a little bit more attention. So we'll walk through these 25 feeder birds fairly quickly to show you where they are. And as I often do in these talks, I'm going in what I call quiz mode. So I'm not going to put a bird up there for a second. Let you think about what you think it might be. And what do you think is the very lightest top 25 feeder bird in Idaho last winter? It is lesser goldfinch. You might have figured that. Probably kinglets would have been, but they're not in the top 25 list. You have to look up the weight of a kinglet to see how that works out. Now the next little group comes in. There's 3 of them coming in all at once. So we got mountain chickadee, black-capped chickadee, and red-breasted nuthatch, all at the same average weight and just ever so slightly bigger than a lesser goldfinch. The next one in line, just a tiny increase from the previous 3, is pine siskin. I actually thought pine siskins were smaller than these others, but there you go. American goldfinch is next, just ever so slightly bigger than a pine siskin. American goldfinches always strike me as chunky, relatively round compared to lesser goldfinches. And you can see they're a little bit heavier, and to me that actually shows up in the field. Next we have a house finch. Here's a female house finch, a little bit bigger than an American goldfinch. Another threesome coming in tied, downy woodpecker, white-breasted nuthatch, and this bird is on the list because of northern and eastern Idaho. There are not very many around the southwest, and dark-eyed junco. Now, until I put this slide together and looked at these weights, I never would have guessed that downy woodpeckers and dark-eyed juncos were about the same weight. It very much surprised me. All right, now we'll keep moving on up through the next set. Next in line is white-crowned sparrow. Here's an immature with the brown and buffy head stripes instead of black and white like the adults. Slightly bigger than white crowns is house sparrow. Here's a female. I had no idea, honestly, that house sparrows were heavier than white crowns. White crowns seem so big, but again, I think the house sparrows have a little bit of a bulkiness or a chunkiness like American goldfinches that maybe I certainly didn't think about. Next, cedar waxwing. Next, song sparrow. And here's another one. I never would have guessed that song sparrows are actually on average heavier than cedar waxwings. So there you go. Now we're getting into birds. I think they're quite obviously bigger than that first whole bunch. Red-winged blackbird, here's a male. Pretty big jump from song sparrow if you look at the bar graph there. Next, European starling. These always strike me as fairly chunky birds, so I'm not too surprised that they're up there. Another pretty good jump yet above a red-winged blackbird. And then the last one on this slide, even bigger than starlings, are American robins. And it's interesting to see people especially when they're getting started in birding, they see a robin and they may identify it at a distance, especially they may first think they're looking at a sharp-shinned hawk or a flicker or even a kestrel. I've seen that happen a number of times. And I think it's just kind of a clue to these birds are maybe a little bit bigger than we tend to think. All right, next bunch. So next above American robin is male sharp-shinned hawk. And remember that among most raptors, maybe all raptors, females are bigger than the males, usually by quite a bit. And you're going to see that here. So here's a male sharpie. And I did not know that male and female mourning doves were significantly different in weight. So here's a female mourning dove is next, a little heavier than a male sharp-shinned hawk. The male mourning dove is next, a little bit bigger than the female. Now here comes northern flicker, just ever so slightly bigger than male mourning doves, which may make sense. Next is Eurasian collared dove. Most people who bird at all realize right away that these birds are a lot bigger than mourning doves. They're really they're longer, they're chunkier, they're heavier. So pretty big jump even above flicker on weight. Now black-billed magpie, substantially heavier again than collared doves. And I think it's interesting, magpies give you this impression of being pretty big, especially because of their long tail. But you'll see there's several other birds that are quite a bit bigger even than magpies, heavier than magpies. I think it's the last one on this graph, then California quail. Probably not too surprising. You can see these are And when you watch them, you can see they're really chunky, very heavy, chunky birds. They don't have the big tail or wingspan, but you can see the big round body. And then finally, if you saw that line come in, I'll do it again. The female sharp-shinned hawk being the biggest of all these. So note that there's mourning dove, northern flicker, collared dove, magpie, and quail. All of those are in between the small male sharp-shinned hawk and the large female sharp-shinned hawk. Okay, the last few are the big boys and girls. Male Cooper's hawk is next. Big jump above our last bunch. Another big jump to American crow. And finally, the biggest of all, see if you can guess what it is among the top 25 feeder birds in Idaho last winter, female Cooper's hawks. So that's that. I just want to point out that when you look at these birds and you're trying to figure out who they are, trying to look at field marks, that all these colors and eye lines and wing bars are all great field marks, but don't forget about weight and sort of related proportions, especially at a distance when you can't get a good look or in bad lighting. Is it a fat, chunky bird? Is it a little skinny bird? Think about how much they weigh. Thanks, and I will see you next time.